I tried it with people pleasing. I tried doing like what you should do, like the things that are expected by the other people. I tried it that way. And it led me to a job I hated. And I was so unhappy. And it's like, this is kind of it. If you keep doing it the way you're told to do it, are you good with that?
Welcome to The Defense Never Rests with Morgan and Akins, your monthly dose of uncommon sense about all things legal and some that are not.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Defense Never Rests. I am your host, Trisha Baxter, and joining me for a fourth time? I'm losing count.
I think so. Fourth.
Well, welcome back to Laura. I think you're going to be my new co-host regular. I just love doing them with you. I think you're so fun. So.
It is fun. Why not? Let's keep the fun.
Well, in this episode, I approached you because the guest that I invited on is somebody we both know and we both love. And I figured what another great episode for you to co-host because you know her personally.
Hey, Trish, I am so excited because on today's episode, we have Olivia Vizacaro joining us, who is my life coach and your life coach. She's both our life coaches.
She's amazing.
She's coaching our lives.
She's making us elite people. That's how I'd like to think. She's making me my life elite. I'm taking it to the elite level.
She's brought my adulting, into fifth gear for sure.
I love it. I love adulting. I love that as a verb now. It was never a verb when we were growing up.
I do like the word. I don't like the practice. Sometimes you just don't want to adult. You want to be a dog and lay around and have people pet you, which is most days for me. But anyway, let's talk about what does Olivia bring to the table today?
Well, let's find out. Let's bring her on. Welcome, Olivia. How are you?
I'm so good. I'm so glad to be here with both of you.
I'm so excited for this episode. Full disclosure, Olivia is my life coach. Talara, she's yours as well, right?
She is, yes.
So, which is why you came on, because I'm like, you know her, I know her. Let's talk about it. I think the work that you do is so important. And I didn't realize how important it was until we started working together. And I think it's been about 2 months that we've been working together. And I knew after our first session together that I would have you on this podcast. I just figured I'd wait until we got some sessions under our belt so I could understand your work. And not that I understand it completely, but I know it's very, very, very important. And I wanted to share, and I want you to come in and talk about what you do for a living, because like I said, I think it's so important. So let's start with, give us your backstory. How did you get to be a life coach for lawyers?
Yeah, I can really go down the War and Peace rabbit hole with this story. My friends joke and say that I tell Olivia stories, and they go on and on and on. So I'll give the abbreviated version. But I always knew I wanted to be an attorney, and I ended up practicing in a criminal defense firm. Before I was licensed, I was a law clerk. I went to school part-time in the evening, and I came to learn pretty early on something that I have now found to be much more common, but that great attorneys aren't always great business owners, right? They kind of become accidental entrepreneurs because they start their own firm, and they're like, wait, I want to be in the courtroom. I don't want to run a business, which is so different from me because I'm an entrepreneur at heart. So I started to see some of the cracks. I really had the most amazing experience during law school, and had some bad habits though. Like, if I'm being very honest, some very people-pleasing tendencies, some workaholic tendencies, some perfectionist tendencies that I've since, worked on through coaching. But I loved it. I felt like I was home. Was with my people, the people that were, just as passionate about criminal defense work as I was. But I started to see cracks in this area in this environment because of the failures or shortcomings with business administration skills. I love my mentor. I'm still close with him. And I understand why he wasn't good at it. It's a skill set we never learned. A lot like what I teach my clients with coaching. It's a skill set you've never learned, how to manage your brain, even though you use it every day. So I started to get nervous. There were financial security issues, cash flow issues coming in and out of a business. It was a small boutique-sized firm. And for better or worse, I kind of let the chatter in my own head and that was coming in from other people really start to get to me. And I'm an only child. I've been on my own since I was 18, bought a house when I was really young, and no one has volunteered to pay my mortgage at any time, unfortunately. But I really started to get concerned. Like, what does my future look like here if it's unstable, right? And we're taught that stability and certainty is so important. I've totally abandoned that model since, but that was really the mindset that I was in at the time. So as this was happening, I was going through law school, and it was the last opportunity that I would have had to go out for on-campus interviews. And law students that like know of big firms or big law firm names like blow me away, because I didn't know any of them. I didn't know Jones Day. I didn't know Kirkland and Ellis. Like, I didn't know any of that. Like, if you said Kirkland, I probably would have thought it was the Costco brand.
I would have thought the same thing.
Okay. Like, I had no idea. All I ever wanted to do was practice criminal defense. So I went out for on-campus interviews, and I've had a ton of jobs. I started working really young, and I'm a good interviewer. I know what to say in order to make a good impression. I bartended for years, so I can talk to anyone about anything for however long I need to. And I ended up getting an offer from the best firm in Detroit, best firm in the state of Michigan. And it was going into the whole process, I was really lying to myself. Like, oh, we'll see what happens. You can always decide later. Like, looking back in hindsight, I was always going to say yes, especially from that firm. I knew it was the most prestigious. It was way more money than any of the other firms in Detroit. And I cared so much about what everyone else thought about my decision to not go there, to turn that down. So when I got the offer, even though I pretended to be deciding, I was decided. I knew that I was going to go there, but I knew in my gut that I didn't want to. Didn't want to work there. It wasn't the environment. It wasn't the kind of law I wanted to practice. And I just had a gut feeling. I'm like the all hands in the middle of the night conference room kind of person. Like, let's work on jury instructions 2 a.m. before trial starts at 8, right? Let's go. That's really my environment. And even though you're working a lot in big law, that's not the environment. Because of the integration of technology, you work alone a lot. And I knew some of that because I had summered there, but I didn't know to the fullest extent until I got back there full time, because you don't have that cohort of your summer program. You're kind of just on your own. And I took the February bar. So I started a little more alone than I think traditional first-year associates do. But anyways, I take the job knowing in my heart of hearts, not the right call for me. And I get there, and something that I see a lot with my clients is like, you've run out of room. You made this decision a long time ago to go to law. Every decision has sequentially been made for you, like for 10 decisions, right? You have to take LSAT, you have to apply to law school, you have to get into law school, you have to get an internship. There's all these things that you do, right? And then you get to your career and you're like, well, now what? Right? It's like in perpetuity, this is kind of it. So I felt like I had run out of paved road. And for the first time in my life, I really had to confront 2 things. Number one, I ran out of paved road on a road that I didn't like that I was on, right? This wasn't what I wanted to do. This wasn't my dream of practicing criminal defense. I'm here, and I was like, how did I get here? That was part of like the question going on in my mind. Second was, and I hadn't realized that I was really in victim mode. And you guys obviously will, like, having worked with me, have heard me talk about like, what are we blaming that we're not taking responsibility for? Like, I was blaming so many people. My mother hates when I talk about this, but like, I was totally blaming my mom because she had such a strong desire for me to go to the financially secure job. Understandably so, right? Of course she wants her daughter to have like a stable income and a paycheck and make a lot of money and have a prestigious job. Like, she's a parent. It makes sense. But I got there and I felt like I had run out of road. And I kind of decided in my victim mentality state that I needed an exit strategy. And like, what's very comical is like, this is a conversation I'm having inside my head, like 2nd month into this job. Like, I ended up there and I was like, what in the world did I do? This was such the wrong call for me. So I started binging entrepreneurship podcasts, like obsessively. Any moment that I wasn't directly working on a file, binging Gary Vaynerchuk. Hack the Entrepreneur is a podcast that I joke with people. I say a podcast episode changed my life. It totally did. I stumbled upon an interview on that podcast. I can't think of the host's name, but he was interviewing a woman who had worked with a life coach. And I decided at this time that I wanted to start a business, but I didn't really know what that looked like yet. And my goal was to start a business. I was like completely delusional, which is funny. I think all entrepreneurs are, a modicum of delusional. You have to be a dreamer and think something's possible in order to get over the risk, that you have to tolerate and get over the doubt and the uncertainty. So I had decided that I was going to start my own business while I was working full-time in Big Law so that I could bankroll my decision to leave Big Law, go back to the firm that I worked at before law school, work full-time there. And like in all of these places, I was working like ridiculous hours, right? Like 70 hours, 8 hours a week. So I was going to do all of that while building a successful business, which like doesn't take any time at all, right? So delusional at the time. That being said, thank goodness I was, because I was consuming this content and I stumbled across this interview with a woman who had basically had my experience. She had taken a job for all the wrong reasons, what other people thought rather than what she wanted to do, and really felt unfulfilled. And she had worked with a life coach, and she explained on the podcast episode that she had worked with the person, I believe, one-on-one, and that the woman was no longer taking one-on-one clients, but that she had the best podcast ever. And except for this one, Trisha.
Of course.
Naturally. And she was like, you have to listen to it. And I was like, this is a rave review from someone who's basically done exactly what I want to do. And I had no idea what a life coach was, but I went over and I tuned into Brooke Castillo's podcast called The Life Coach School. And I always tell people what you need to hear has a way of finding you. Like, so long as you choose to listen to it. Right?
I'm with you on that. I'm so with you on that.
The first episode was all about like being an emotional childhood and blaming other people in your life for the results you have. And very expressly, she had over 100 episodes at the time. Now she has well into the 300s of podcast episodes, but this is the first one I listened to. It was all about being a state of blame, not accepting ownership for the choices that you've made. And she taught me two things. Everything that you have in your life or don't is the result of a choice you've made. And when you open up to that and you start to like find how that's true, like even everything in the room that I'm in, right? Like I chose the chalkboard. I chose this easel, which I don't like, by the way, because it has a glare on it. So I'm like shopping for another one, but I'm still choosing it. I'm choosing it right now. I'm choosing to let it be in this office space of mine. Like we choose all of it. We choose our partners, we choose our jobs, and we re-choose them every day. And it was a hard truth that I really needed, like, kind of a smack in the face wake-up call too. Because at the time I was in this mindset of like, I was forced to come here. I was forced to take this job. I was forced to abandon my dream. It was so much, internal drama that my parents had forced me to take it, and my friends didn't understand, because I had a lot of friends who were like, it's so much money. You're going to make way more money than me. You'd be crazy not to take that, right? All that chatter. And I realized I kind of awoke to the fact that I had chosen this very intentionally, you don't fall into things, you choose them for one reason or another. And that was a huge truth, along with the fact that I was still choosing it. No one put a gun to my head every day to go there. I chose it every single day. And the fact was that I cared more about what other people thought than I cared about what I wanted. And like, really, you're betraying yourself when you're doing that. Like when you're people pleasing to that extent, you're so out of integrity and alignment, and like you lose trust with yourself. So I started to see like, I'm not perfect. What? And B, I've got like some really deep-seated work to do. And it's funny, I know we've been talking a lot kind of internally about Glennon Doyle and Love Warrior and Untamed. I read Untamed probably a couple months before I found Brooke. And it was the first time I had ever really learned about discomfort and embracing discomfort and she also talked about like her experience growing up. I have a belief that 27 is a really powerful age. It's kind of the stage you get to in your life. Some people get to it later, but at least for me, I felt like it was the age at which I tried it society's way. Like I tried it with people pleasing. I tried doing like what you should do, like the things that are expected by the other people. I tried it that way. And it led me to a job I hated. And I was so unhappy. And it's like, this is kind of it. If you keep doing it the way you're told to do it, are you good with that? And I was like, no, I want to live a life I like even if it makes other people uncomfortable. And like, we can get into the whole conversation about like guilt and overcoming that. But that was my first lesson. My second lesson from Brooke was that thoughts cause your feelings. And like, obviously it's on the board behind my head. This is my church. I'm not religious, but like, this is what I believe in more than anything. I'm a math nerd at heart. So I love that the model is formulaic, but we're not taught this growing up. We're taught that circumstances cause how we feel. We're taught that other people cause our emotions. Other people hurt our feelings, right? Other people cause us to feel offended. Other people make us angry, frustrated. Other people make us feel guilty. Situations make us feel guilty. And that's why we people please, right? Because we think if we make other people happy, then we get to feel better. And we think that we cause other people's emotions too. And it's obviously, you guys both know, like it's a profound concept. It takes some unlearning. It takes some, learning anew to start to realize that. But when you apply it to every situation in your life, you're like, damn, there's a thought every time that causes my feel every single time. Right. And there are other thoughts I could choose to think about this, and really learning that I'm always in control of how I feel based on what I choose to think. And sometimes, as you both know, that takes some redirecting, but I'm always in control of my emotional experience. We don't have to feel out of control. And it's not my responsibility to manage how other people feel.
So that's, I think, the critical stuff that I've been learning from you lately. Before we get into that though, I do want to go back to your story. You're in Big Law. You've had this epiphany. You've, listened to all these podcasts. How long do you stay in Big Law before you decide to leave? And ground us, and how are you 27 at this point?
Yeah.
So and that's not bad. I think, a lot of people have the same experience that you do. Mm-hmm. They choose jobs that they think they should choose because somebody else has told them it's the right path, and they get there unhappy. So I'm so glad that you told that, because I think it is more common than uncommon that that's mm-hmm. the case. And it's also good, I think, at 27. I mean, you realize that at 27, that's powerful. I know people in their 40s that are realizing it. So.
For sure. I still had in my heart of hearts a desire to go back to the firm that I had been at. So holding on to a little bit of the delusion of being able to do two things very well at once, which like I could have had I managed my boundaries. But I went back to the firm that I worked at during Big Law. And I broke a rule I have. I have a rule. I've worked in a lot of jobs, and I've only done it one other time where I've gone back. And I have a reason that I don't go backwards. I have a theory that like the ground shifts. Like I think of it as tectonic plates, but the ground shifts while you're gone. And you're not the same. We all look the same, right? Like the people that I used to work with, they look just like they did when I was there before. I looked just like I did when I worked there before. But we're totally different people. And they were expecting a 25-year-old people-pleasing law clerk. At the time, I was almost 30, and I was just about to turn 30. And it wasn't a good fit. I had so much more agency. I was so much less of a people pleaser, having applied this work in my own life. I was so much more solutions oriented, right? I'm like, what result do we want to create? Let's find the actions we need to take. Like, let's get out of the drama about complaining. Like, let's go. How do we need to feel? What do we need to be thinking? Like, let's figure it out. And really had a lot of compassion. The same problems were still there as far as like business administration, but I had spent roughly like the past 3 years studying, or the past 2.5 years studying entrepreneurship. and like learning how to do that for myself. So as I was starting to build my coaching business, I went back there and had offered to really kind of run things as a lower level person there, but to take over a lot of the business administration. And some people like their dysfunction. And I really had to coach myself because I had like this very romantic idea of doing both and doing homicide trials with my former mentor. And the truth is that I was at a point where I needed to work for myself. And I really coached myself hard, knowing that like we can't change other people. So the only person that I could control in that situation, I could want him to do things differently. All that would do is cause my own frustration. So I got to a point where I said, the only person you can control is yourself. So either stay, coach yourself on staying and be good with things not being managed how you think they should be, right? Should thoughts, guys. Mm-hmm. And I said, I don't want to do that. So I left with no plan, no grounds paved in front of me, like no runway whatsoever. I left with love, and I still love the people that I used to work with, but I controlled the only thing that I could, which was myself. And I made myself a promise. I said, I'm willing to be uncomfortable for as long as this takes. I'm willing to be bad at sales for as long as it takes. And like, you guys hated sales, the worst. But like, I learned that process, and you've heard me say like gag and go through the discomfort, right? But I just decided to get really curious, study building a business, and I refused to quit. I took quitting off the table. I went all in on me, and it's been a year. And I just, the past 2 months, I made more in my business than I did in Big Law. So.
Yay. That's amazing. Amazing. And I just want to highlight a couple things. Is I love the compelled part of your story, because it's kind of like you're pulled to it. And if you're pulled to something, it's a calling. It's like it will overwhelm you and overtake you. And I love that you honored that. And maybe you didn't go all in at first, but that pull it'll bring you there. I love that.
You know, it's funny, Olivia, you mentioned too, Untamed. You know what your story reminds me of, along with your gear? The story of the cheetah. When you were in Big Law, you were like the caged cheetah.
For sure.
But the wild was still there. It was in her eyes. And I feel like when you talk about being compelled in your calling, you were being true to your nature. And obviously your success speaks to that this is what you're supposed to be doing.
I totally agree with you. I think, so I've had that voice, like that part of Untamed resonates with me so much, because it's like, this can't be all there is.
Right.
And I had to get to a point, and I think this is true for everyone, no matter what your self-development journey is. For me, it's been starting a business, and we'll talk about kind of like the stigma around coaching and personal development and all of that stuff, but taking on that risk just with the knowing. And Glennon Doyle talks about that a lot too, like just the knowing,
right?
Like there's more than this. I know I can. And part of it was having amazing role models. One of the things that I try and do with my story and just talking about like, yeah, is it uncomfortable? There are parts that are uncomfortable for sure. But like, I would love to serve as an example of what's possible for people who have this similar experience. Like you can leave. I love challenging people's limiting beliefs. Like you can make more money doing something else than you did in Big Law, right? If you decide to not quit. There are people that are lawyers who don't work in Big Law that make way more money than people do in Big Law. So changing those narratives, I think, is really important. But yeah, no, I felt compelled. And I have a coach that I've worked with. She says, you know, true coaches were probably coaches before they were coaches. And like, so me, I was on the summer associate committee when I was in Big Law, and I was the office where like the people would come in. I'm like, okay, how are you feeling right now?
You're the office therapist without being paid for it.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Well, so let's talk about, for those who don't know what a life coach is, what would you tell them?
So I would say that I'm a person that like we examine your mind. I show you your blind spots, right? Our work together will be gaining awareness as to what's causing every problem that you're currently experiencing. There's always only two causes: a thought you're thinking or a feeling you're unwilling to feel. And finding that and questioning, as far as thoughts go, like, is it true? Why are we choosing to think that? Right? As far as feelings go, why are we avoiding it? What are we afraid of? Can we allow it instead? Just seeing our natural responses and learning about ourselves. We use our brain every single second of every day. We've never been taught how to manage it. They don't teach you in grade school, high school, undergrad, law school. You never learn. Our parents don't know. This is like a hard truth to come to grips with, right? Our parents don't know how to manage their brains. So they taught us all their limiting belief stuff and all their bad habits of like perfectionism and workaholicism and people pleasing and procrastinate. Like we learn all of our stuff from people that don't know how to manage their minds either. And it truly is a skill set. So we work together for you to first gain awareness as to what's going on that's causing the problems. Then we reverse engineer the model. We reverse engineer this process. We decide what results you want to create, and we work backwards, figuring out what actions you need to take. What are the obstacles to you taking those actions, solving for that, debugging it, figuring out how you need to feel and what mindset you need to have in order to generate all of that is really this work. I love it so much more than therapy for a couple different reasons. Mainly, I think it's more future focused. It's more implementable. And when I say that, it's really not me giving you actions. You guys kind of both know that, right? Like you have the answers within you. You're just not aware of your own wisdom at times. Sometimes there's blocks, and I help you question some of those blocks, find your blind spots, point things out to you in a way that facilitates that personal development.
So when I tell people that I have hired a life coach and I try to explain to them what it is, it's like words vomiting out of my mouth that I'm not sure that I say coherently. But then the next question is always, well, what's the difference between that and a therapist? What's your answer to that?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple differences. One, the difference between circumstances and thoughts. And I really think that this is lost in therapy. And very frankly, I think this is lost in a lot of other coaching methodologies. This is like the model is very life coach school specific. It's Brooke Castillo's kind of creation. There are a lot of people in the personal development space that are all saying different variants of this, but I really think this formulaic distinction is huge when it comes to coaching, because so much of what we assume to be true, what we assume to be a circumstance, is really our thought, our opinion about the circumstance. And it's that understanding, or really a misunderstanding, that's causing our emotional experience. So differentiating between the two and finding the neutrality in a circumstance and realizing that you're causing your emotional experience and taking ownership of that and responsibility of that. I think that's really so much of what coaching work is. And it's hard for people. I work with some people who have been in therapy before, and it's a little jarring for them to be like, what do you mean I'm causing my own suffering? And I get that it's jarring. At the same time, it's also the best news you've ever received, because if you're causing your own suffering, it means the only solution you need is yourself to change how you're thinking, right? And this work isn't always to feel better. Sometimes we want to feel sad. If my parents die, I want to be sad about it. I want to think sad thoughts. I want to feel sad. That being said, like in my heart of hearts, I know that circumstance, like their passing, is neutral, and I caused my pain, right? My grandfather, when he passed, suffered for a very long time. I missed him. He was a wonderful man, a huge part of my life, but like I didn't feel sad. I felt relieved, right? Other people in my family felt sad because they had different thoughts about it than I did, right? So just the space of knowing like I go into every situation like that now, right? Very grounded, very much like however I'm feeling. I might feel like ass right now, but like however I'm feeling, I'm causing it. I'm causing it with my thinking. It just gives me some distance that I really don't think you get in therapy. I think therapy provides a lot of awareness, as to like, you are the way you are because of this past, right? It's very narrative driven, but it's kind of, I have a coach friend who describes it like a Carfax report. Like, here you go. This is like the damage you've incurred. You just get to manage this now. And like, very candidly, screw that. It's just a set of limiting beliefs. Like, is there a proper place for like therapy and, clinical diagnoses? Yes, I believe that. Right. But so much of what I think people go to therapy for can be fixed with coaching and can be solved with coaching.
I agree. I think I'm on the coaching bandwagon now. I even told you once, I think I'm addicted to coaching because now I had a LinkedIn coach. Then I hired you a life coach. Then I hired a sales coach. I'm like, what other coaches can I get? But it is what you do is very teaching for me, as I'll define it, is the skills of mind management. And at 47, I'm learning those skills, which is crazy for me that this isn't, like you said, taught in even elementary or middle or high school or somewhere along the educational process. Why aren't we taught the skills to manage our mind? And especially, I mean, everybody should do this. There I'm shoulding, and I know Olivia doesn't like shoulding, but like it is so helpful that a lot of people would get a benefit from it, but especially those in a high stress job or career, or people that, when you manage people or you manage outside companies or vendors or clients or whatever it may be, it's so helpful. It's like working with you. It's been like a little bit of a delete button on a lot of the little tiny nagging negative self-talk that I've had. And there's a clarity which I've never had before. And I feel better. I feel way better. So I'm a big proponent. I love it. It is really the tools to teach you to manage your mind. And I love it, but there's a stigma around it. And do you get that people think it's weakness to reach out and start working with you?
Yeah, some people do. Some people, and it kind of goes to the growth versus fixed mindset conversation, right? Some people think that like, oh, there must be something wrong that needs fixing. And I had a good friend who I explained what I did as a coach, and he goes, so you help people do life better? I was like, yes, that's exactly what I do. So there's a broad spectrum of people that I work with. Some people that I work with are really paralyzed with stress and overwhelm and anxiety and like cannot get themselves out of it, right? They don't know how to manage their time, in all fairness, because no one's ever taught them. I totally get that. That was part of my experience when I was in Big Law too. I struggled with time management and I studied it, but like no one ever teaches you that along the way. Just like no one teaches you to manage your mind. Then I work with a lot of people that like just want to do life better, right? They want to be able to be more present. They want to go on and accomplish greater, bigger goals. So for those people, they're more growth mindset, right? It's like whatever I'm at right now, there's more and I want to accomplish and achieve the more. But no, there is a stigma. Do I kind of think that like the people that have that negative mindset or negative viewpoint about coaching, do I think they're going to hire a coach? Probably not. I'd say those people aren't my people, which is totally fine. I think everyone could use a coach. That's my personal opinion.
It's funny that you mentioned this stigma because I don't know if I've been living under a rock, but I'm not familiar with it. And what I'm wondering is it the same stigma that still exists for seeing a therapist, or is it something different? What do you think?
I think the answer is both, actually. I think part of it is the same stigma as seeing a therapist. Like, really? You need someone to like solve your problems for you, or you can't figure this out on your own? And again, it's like, you've never been taught how to manage your mind. Why would you know how to manage? Like, it's such a thought error. Like at what point did someone teach you how this works? Right. And it's not intuitive. There's a lot going on behind the scenes. One of the things that I say pretty frequently is like, your brain's not your best friend. You're kind of at odds with each other, right? You want to take action. It's cognitive dissonance. Part of you wants to do something, part of you doesn't. Right. So there's that internal conflict dialogue. So I think part is the same stigma as therapy. I've heard some wild things from people that are close to me, from people that are strangers. They just don't understand it until you like walk them through an example. I love telling the story about my dad. because he's like the biggest skeptic. Mind you, he's taken like 0 time to learn about coaching. Bless his heart. He owns a collision shop. He's one of the smartest people I've ever met in my entire life. But I couldn't envision him like working with a coach. He's just like, you got a problem, you solve it. I don't know. So one day, this was earlier this year, and I saw all the doubt he had in me being a coach, right? And like, in all fairness, his daughter, who worked at the most prestigious firm in the state of Michigan, like quit, left her job, became an entrepreneur with this business concept he doesn't understand, right? Here I am feeling compelled, and he's like, what is she doing? Natural parent response, like worried, terrified, right? So I finally started to see his worry, and I called him on it. I was like, I know you think this isn't going to work. Like, I know you don't get what I do. I get it enough for the both of us. So like, you can be worried. Like, I'm fine with you being worried. I trust myself implicitly. I know this work helps people. And he's like, okay, but like, what do people do? Like, for instance, they call you, we're on the phone. He's like, so they call you and they've got a problem. He's like, you don't know how to solve every problem. And I'm like, okay, give me an example. And he goes, he's building a deck this summer. And he's like, so someone calls you and asks you how to build a deck. You don't know how to build a deck, which he's totally right. I do not know how to build a deck. So he's like, you don't know how to build a deck. So like, what do? You like tell him like, okay, I'm going to go research how to build a deck and like call you back. And I'm like, no, it's like not at all what happened. That's not at all what I do. It's very funny. That's what lawyers do when people call them with problems. We're like, hold on a sec. I'm going to go do some research and I'll call you back. So I told him that's what lawyers do, kind of jokingly, but then I started to describe it. Right. And I was like, would you ever think that you don't know how to build a deck? He's like, well, maybe initially. I'm like, okay. I'm like, but then what happens? Right. And I'm like, cause you end up building the deck, right? The people that would call me to build a deck or learn how to build a deck, their problem is that they're thinking, I don't know how to build a deck. And when they're thinking the I don't know thought, when they're thinking I don't know, they feel confused. And when they feel confused, they spin in I don't know, they spin in confusion, they shut down. And the result they create is they still don't know how to build a deck. I said, that would never be your thought. I know you well enough, right? Like, what thought would you be thinking? And it just kind of like comes over him. And he's like, I'd think like I can figure it out. I'm like, yeah. And when you're thinking the thought, I can figure it out, how would you feel? And he's like, probably determined. I'm like, great. What would you do when you're feeling determined? He's like, well, I'd probably start with YouTube. And like, I'd Google some like deck stuff and I'd probably watch some videos, but then I'd go talk to the guys at Chelsea Lumber and like, see if they had any tips and like, maybe they recommend like a deck expert. And I talked to the deck expert and like, I figured out and like, probably some of it's just like going outside and like figuring out what I want. And I guess like I'd figure out all the steps. Mind you, he's built the deck. It took all summer. I've helped him with it on weekends. So now I sort of know how to build a deck. But I point out to him, I'm like, that's the difference. Like the problem is always the same thing. So I can help everyone with the problem. It's always the thought you're thinking, I don't know how to build the deck, or a feeling you're unwilling to feel. If you're feeling confused and you resist feeling that, you're not willing to push through it to get to a solution. Like that's the problem. I can always solve your thought problem because I can show you what results it's causing. You don't like that result, and we can redirect you to the model that serves you by creating the result that you want. And he's like, I'm like, so there's always one problem and I can always solve it. And he's like, this work you do sounds really useful. I'm like, yeah, imagine that.
Oh my gosh, I love that story. What a great story.
Mm-hmm. So there are skeptics, but they just have to see the value of it. And like, you guys are examples of that, right? Because like the people around you will see you not get upset about stuff.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people don't know what it is and they see it as therapy. And just to circle back on that, it's, we do have a mental health stigma that if you think you're struggling with your mind, that's weakness. Mm-hmm. And I think the more we bring attention to mental health, these stigmas tend to erode away. But I will say probably for years, I would look at people that I had what called that I thought was like emotional intelligence, that they didn't respond emotionally to things that I was responding emotionally to. And I would look at them with envy and be like, how are they doing that? Like, I would bring work home with me. I'd bring the angst home with me. I couldn't separate it out. I'd bring it into my family. And I always wanted not to do that, but I didn't know how. And I mean, maybe I'd heard of life coaches then, or maybe I just didn't sink in. Maybe I wasn't ready. Who knows? But that's what this work for me has been about. It is an emotional intelligence. It's like you say, everything is a choice. And once I accepted that everything is a choice and I can choose not to feel that way, it was beautiful for me. It was, and every time we work together, a little bit more weight comes off. You know, a little less of the negative self-talk happens, or when it happens, I know how to flip it around and change it. So if there's anybody who lacks an emotional intelligence or struggles with the anxiety of work or whatever it may be, a life coach is such a helpful tool. Not to call you a tool, Olivia, but you're a very helpful tool. And I look at it as, you know, there's nothing wrong with elite athletes hiring a million different coaches. And if you're going to be elite at something, why try to do it yourself? You can't do it yourself. The elite Olympic athletes don't do it themselves. They have coaches for every part of their training. Mm-hmm. They have mental coaches, physical coaches, speed, and whatever it may be. And they're elite. If you want to be elite at life, then mind management is key. And you can't, I mean, unless you're like, know this stuff already, which very few people do, unless you know it already, a life coach is at least number one, the shortest path to that goal. So I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge fan of you, one, which is why we have these hats, Olivia Nation, because you're going to rule the nation one day. And as I said before we started, I want to discount when that happens.
Fair.
So Trish, you missed this earlier, and I wanted to make sure to bring it up because I would like copyright. Can I get copyright off of my idea, which is, are you on? Get it? Olivia Nation, O-N. I'm on. Are you on?
So
That's
good.
Awesome.
Copyright
So
to La
good.
Herculean Corsi. Yes,
Got it.
yes. You heard it here. You heard it here first. Thank you very much. Yes. Good night.
Mic drop. If I could drop this mic I was wearing, I would drop it right now.
Yeah, and then we wouldn't be able to hear you, so that wouldn't be really good. But you know, to bounce off what Trish was saying, I agree. It's gonna take, I think, maybe a period of time. Maybe we're closer to it than we know, where having a life coach is going to be something that's commonplace, acceptable, not frowned upon. And hopefully the same with therapists too. I think it's horrible, you know, that there is still that stigma. You know, I was talking to my son's pediatrician about maybe getting him a therapist, and she says, yes, start them young. Teach them that it's okay to talk about their feelings, to share. But the other comment that I was going to make, you know, I wasn't really sure what I was getting into when I hired you and a life coach, and man, you exceeded my expectations. And I've been working with a therapist for many years, and they complement one another. One does not replace the other, and there's a time and a place for each. But the concept and the tools that I'm learning with you, and it's not a one and done. You know, Trish, you were talking about, you know, unless you know all this stuff, I read a lot, you know, and I've learned a lot about these things, but I love the formula. I love the homework. I love the actionable steps. I love the accountability and the progress that I'm seeing. But the other thing that I love, and to your point, Olivia, you know, our parents don't know how. They didn't teach us how. I want to break the cycle.
Yeah.
I want to break the cycle for my boys, so that, because they're not going to do what I tell them to. They're going to do what I do. They're going to model my behavior. I want to be a good model of that behavior. And I don't mean just in terms of, you know, feeling safe to hire a life coach and get help when I need it, but to put these things into practice and not be the person that has a fit when the wrong color flowers show up to my wedding, which they did, by the way. It was
No.
okay. It was okay.
It was
You know,
okay.
my eyebrows were singed, you know, a couple of days before my wedding. It's okay. It's fine. It's fine.
Just a
That's serious
circumstance.
work, Talar. I mean,
It is.
done the work. I love it.
No, so
Yeah.
I really love what Talar touched on though, and because I used to be much more than I am now. I used to be a huge consumer. So binged podcasts, right? Thank goodness it got me to this work. Reading a ton, right? But consuming is different than applying,
Yeah.
right? And when you work with someone, you apply this work. You apply it to your life. We look at, specific instances in your life that when you come, you think they're causing your pain. We learn that that's not what's happening, right? We learn that it's our thinking. And then we decide how we want to act in that moment. But we really examine, study from an observational point, which is so powerful, right? We get out of, it's like you can't see the forest through the trees. We get out of that and get into that. What's actually going on? How are we reacting? Why are we reacting this way? Most people don't understand why they do what they do. And this work gives you a tool to do that, but it comes through that application, because like knowing but not doing isn't really knowing it. Knowing it is applying it and having, doing the work, having the results to show for it.
Well, and let's do that. Let's go through your model. This is what you did for me on the first day of our first session, is you explained your model. So let's talk about it, because I think I want you to go through your model, if you will, not to have you give away your trade secrets, but you said I could, so I'm going
All the
to.
things. Yeah.
So, but the focus for me, which is where I'm at right now, which is the difference between circumstances and thought. Some people, everybody, well, not everybody, I would intertwine them. They were one and the same my entire life. And so if you could go through your model and then back up to talk about the difference between the two of those.
Yeah, absolutely. So the model is premised on this, right? We start with circumstances. And I love teaching it to lawyers. You guys have both heard me say that before. I love teaching it to lawyers because we have lawyer brains. We're taught to look at circumstances, factual situations in a multitude of ways. So there's 5 parts: circumstances, thoughts, feelings, actions, results. They're all stacked on top of one another, and they all cause one another essentially. Okay. Except the first part, that's the distinction between circumstances and thoughts. So circumstances, we start with the C. Circumstances are facts, data points, information we would all agree upon. Okay, truly neutral. Circumstances are neutral, they're just facts. So words someone says, the specific quote, words like we would read on a transcript, actions that we would all agree upon because we can watch them on a television screen, right? Like what the date that it is. Things like that, what someone said, what someone did in a very factual manner. We take out all the adjectives, all the qualifier words, all the opinions, right? We just get to the circumstance. Circumstances themselves are inherently neutral. We are not taught this growing up. We're taught that they're either good or bad, positive or negative. We're also taught that they cause our feelings, okay? It's never the case. It's actually our thoughts that cause our feelings. Thoughts are sentences that our brain serves us. They're just sentences in our heads, right? And they're the sentences that we think about neutral circumstances. Our thoughts aren't neutral. Our thoughts are either positive or negative. And it's our positive or negative thoughts that cause how we feel. Feelings, and we like to think in feeling sentences. Well, I really feel like he's a jerk. I really feel like what she said was rude. That's not a feeling. Feelings are one-word emotions that we experience as vibrations in our body, right? When we really think about it, even though that sounds a little kooky, we can feel where we feel certain emotions in our body when we slow down and think about it. I know where I feel stress. I feel it in my shoulders. I feel anger in my face. I feel embarrassment, pit of my stomach, least favorite emotion to feel. I try and avoid that, or at least in the past, I've tried to avoid that at all costs. I'm better at gagging and going and leaning into that discomfort now. I feel excitement in my chest, right? Love kind of courses through my body and is warm. We can place these different emotions in our body. So Feelings are one word vibrations that we experience in our body, and they drive our action. So circumstances are neutral. Thoughts aren't. They're positive or negatives. They're just sentences that our brain serves us. Our thoughts cause our feelings. Our feelings drive our action. And action, couple different ways we see this. There's productive action, and I don't mean that like in Trish and Talar had a really productive day. I just mean that you did something. It might be unproductive what you actually did. You might have wasted time, but you did something. It might be binging the entire second season of Friends, or eating all the cookies, or drinking all the alcohol, right? To feel better, but you did something. It was an action that you took. Then there's like there's inaction, which is like spinning in confusion, spinning in I don't know, procrastinating, comparing and despairing, right? When you're just like kind of like sitting there thinking about like other people's lives and how they're better than yours. There are ways that we don't take any action, but time passes, right? So those are the two different kinds of action. The action we take is based off of how we're feeling, okay? We respond to how we feel in one of 4 ways. 3 of them are bad. Fun fact, right? Most of us aren't aware of that, but 3 of them are bad. First way we respond to emotion is we resist it, which is like white knuckling fear on an airplane, which my mom does. Or to give you another Friends reference, is like Ross Geller on the Friends episode where he's like, I'm fine. No, everything's fine. Everything's absolutely fine. Like you're just in denial about how you're feeling, right? So you resist it. You try and shove it in the closet with, all the other skeletons. Second way we respond to emotion is we avoid it. And that looks like doing anything in the immediate future that brings you more pleasure or more comfort than whatever negative emotion you're feeling, right? So this is why when we're feeling stressed, we like self-sabotage. It's counterintuitive, and we procrastinate by doing anything else that makes us feel better in the moment. Drink too much, eat too much, scroll too much, stream too much, shop too much, any of those indulgent emotions. Or activities that make us feel temporarily better, but leave us with a net negative consequence. We're kind of like in the red at the end of the day. Third way is we react, right? We don't like feeling a negative emotion, so we take some action that makes us feel more powerful. So this is a little bit different than procrastination. Think of people who feel insecure and they lash out, right? It doesn't create the result they want, right? People do this with overworking too. They feel stressed and they go take like a bunch of frenzied action. Like, I'll just feel better.
Guilty.
Right? So, and people are normally like one of the two. Some people with stress get paralyzed. Other people overwork. But it's like, are you using your time the best? Is that how you want to live your entire life, right? That's where like we struggle with being present with family and, creating a full life that we want when we're just overworking as a reactionary measure, right? Because it feels productive, even though it might not be producing the result of like the life you want at the end of the day. So those are the first 3 ways: resist, avoid, react. What we want to learn how to do is allow, right? And my girl Talar with her yoga with her love of yoga can relate to this, right? Like just being present and like staying on your mat, not running out of the hot room, which is a Love Warrior reference by Glennon Doyle, but really being able to sit with the discomfort and like stay on your path, stay on your course, do what you want to create the result that you want without detouring because this negative emotion comes up, just allowing it to be there. So thoughts cause feelings, feelings cause actions, actions create your results. And what's really intuitive and so important about this work, I'm glad we walked through this, is because most self-help personal development stuff is all focused on action, right? And there's a problem with that. And this is why I love it, is that when you stop doing the action that makes you temporarily feel better, because sometimes we take action that temporarily makes us feel better, like we exercise. Amazing. You feel better. But like you haven't solved the mindset stuff. You haven't solved the thought causing the problem. You haven't solved the feeling causing the problem. So if you're just constantly taking action to feel better, you have to keep taking the action to feel better. And when you stop feeling better. unless you address what's going on beneath the surface. So finding the thoughts that are causing the discomfort, figuring out, that discomfort and learning how to allow it. That's the work that's really long lasting.
Well, can we walk through an example of that so that people can see the work that you do and I do and Talar does to ground it. What kind of example do we want to use? Let's talk about like the lawyer, the associate work who gets negative feedback. Can we talk about that? Gets negative feedback from their boss. Your brief sucks. And they take that home with them that night. How would you coach? Like, let's just say that's me. I have a boss and they just said to me, Trisha, what you wrote is really, really bad. You need to redo it. And I can't get over myself, the fact that person just said that to me.
Yeah. So the words are, your brief sucks, right? So that becomes the circumstance, right? Your brief sucks. And then the young associate has all the thoughts about that, right? So we do a thought download. And part of that is like when we're in a session, I'm facilitating that by asking you questions, right?
But people say I'm the young associate and I feel that way.
Okay. So Trisha, the circumstance is your brief sucks. What are your thoughts?
That I'm inadequate, that I should have written something better.
Oh. Right. So first of all, we want to look at, did he tell you that you were inadequate?
No.
Didn't use those words.
No.
Right. Your brain went there. And also not to, the brief is inadequate. You changed it to I'm inadequate. Right. When you're thinking the thought, I'm inadequate, how do you feel? What's the one word emotion you feel?
I want to say like a failure, but I know what you're going to tell me, that failure is a thought as well.
Failure's a thought.
I'm ashamed. Like I should know better. Ashamed.
Yeah. Right. So when we think the thought, I'm a failure, we always feel ashamed. So I'm inadequate. When you think the thought, I'm inadequate, you feel ashamed. When you feel ashamed, how do you show up? What do you do?
Probably recoil. Like I don't do anything. Like I freeze.
Mm-hmm. Kind of go internal, right? Stop showing up. What result does that create?
I definitely don't improve. I don't redo the brief very well, if at all.
Right? You keep creating the result of like further inadequacy. And now it is within your control, right? Like you're showing up in an inadequate manner because you're recoiling, because you're not leaning in to the opportunity. So one of the things in this situation that we would work through is like, is it true that you're inadequate?
No. I mean, I'm in my young associate role. I've been practicing for 7 years. I've done really good work. I'm smart. I'm not inadequate.
Yeah, right? Like even if like the brief was inadequate, like we get to decide, do you think it was inadequate? Let's start there. Do you think it was inadequate?
Now looking at his comments, yeah, I see his points or her points. My boss is a woman. Yeah, I see her points.
Okay. So like what's happening is that she's not making you feel ashamed. You're agreeing with her, right? You have a thought about what she said, that she's right, that it's inadequate. You could think she's confused.
No, but I think her comments, like her little comments in the margins, make sense.
Okay.
And the changes that she's recommending to the brief, I think would make it better.
Okay. So when you think the thought, her suggestions make sense and would make the brief better, how do you feel?
I feel like I'm learning, like productive.
Okay.
That sort of feeling, that productive feeling, like I feel good because she's helping me. I'm getting help.
Yeah, right. So those are all different thoughts you can choose to think. I'm getting help. Like,
I'm going to be better the next time I write because of this exercise I've gone through with her.
Yeah. What's your expectation on getting feedback?
Yeah, I mean, I expect to get feedback. I would like to get, well, yeah. I mean, clearly if I'm thinking that I'm failing because she's commenting on my brief sucks, I'm not receiving the feedback.
Mm-hmm.
So, but my brain tells me I want the feedback because in my brain knows that I only get better with feedback.
Why is she able to give you feedback?
Well, she's more experienced. She's walked the walk. You know, she's done what I would like to do. She's been practicing 25 years. She knows a thing or two that I probably don't.
Yeah, of course she gives you comments. That's why people review our work, right? Right? So like going through finding all the evidence of like, where are you adequate? Where do you do things well? Right? Because like across the board, the thought that you're inadequate isn't true. It's a thought error. Your brain serves it up to you because your brain wants you to not fix things, to not show up, conserve energy, seek temporary pleasure, and avoid pain, right? Leaning into development, professional development is uncomfortable. So your brain serves that up to you. So you shut down.
So we do need to wrap this up, but I just want to ask you a couple questions as we close out. One, give me 2 books and 2 podcasts, top 2, that you would recommend somebody who wants to start mindset work to listen to and read.
First book, Love Warrior. It's the first book that ever taught me to embrace discomfort. And that truly just shifted everything for me. We're taught our whole lives to avoid discomfort. So definitely Love Warrior. I just read it, but I'm going to say that this is also kind of about discomfort, and I'm amazed with human resiliency. It blows me away. So I just read Man's Search for Meaning, and I would add that to the list. It talks a lot about suffering. It's an account from a Holocaust survivor, Viktor Frankl, and just the human experience. I think there's some really profound lessons there that like our suffering's ours too. No one's lived our life. I think that's so profound. Not one other person ever in history has had the life we've had. Like, so we can own the suffering, right? You guys have probably heard me say, how is this happening for you? Right? Because it all is if we choose to shift. So those would probably be the 2 books. Man's Search for Meaning really resonated with me too. Podcast, Life Coach School podcast by Brooke Castillo. Bar none. Complete fire. I'm such a podcast junkie.
Well, you can give me more than 2 if you want. I'll bend the rule this once.
Okay, so Gary. Love you. The Gary Vaynerchuk audio experience. I think he talks a lot of his thesis. Some stuff's business related, but I really think his dialogue about not giving, can I swear? Am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, you can do whatever you want.
Okay, awesome. Not giving a fuck about what other people think. Like as many times as you can have that seep into your brain. Like I love that he's like, yeah, I say the same shit over and over and over again because you guys need to hear it like 142 times before you start to listen. I feel that way about telling people it's okay to put themselves first and be their first priority all the time. Like I'm going to keep saying that until you guys listen to me and do it. But I think his thesis about not caring about what other people think, like getting really gritty in order to create the life that you want, might not be comfortable at first, but it's going to be worth it in the long run. I thought that really resonated with me. I think Cara Lowenthal's Unfuck Your Brain is really great. She's a former attorney turned certified life coach through the Life Coach School as well. She's got an awesome company that is like subscription based now. I think her content's fire. And anyone who owns a business, you don't have to be a coach, but Stacey Bayman's Make Money as a Life Coach podcast. It is the best business building, marketing, branding, sales content I've ever come across. I recommend it to every business owner I know. I think she's truly a genius. Also a Life Coach School certified coach.
Love it. I love it. I think we are running long. I think I probably say this a lot, but we could totally keep talking for like another 2 hours. But let's end this last final question. Where can people find you?
People can find me at thelessstressedlawyer.com or on LinkedIn at Olivia Zacro. I am super active on LinkedIn, thanks to, in part, you ladies and finding you all there and networking. So super active on LinkedIn. That's where all my content kind of originates. I shouldn't say kind of. That's where all my content originates. So if you want to hear more about my little teachings on a daily basis, you can find me on LinkedIn. And I just recently started a learning series that I'm super excited about. One day a month, last day of every month, I'm teaching. So like school's in session now, right? It's the fall. So they're called Less Stressed Sessions. They're 1 hour long, half teaching, half Q&A. And we're going to go through these concepts. And I wanted to find a way where I could teach more one-on-one through a video platform and be able to interact with people and answer their questions, coach them live if they want coaching live. And we do it once every month. So you can apply what you learn and carry it forward into the next month. There's homework. So I give the best homework, I think. That's my thought about my homework. So there's homework, there's workbooks. It's really an interactive experience. So you can, know by doing, not just consume, you can apply. So if people want to sign up for that, they can go to lessstressedsessions.com/sign up.
Awesome. And make sure you do that. Also, make sure that you reach out on LinkedIn and connect with Olivia. She really does have some great content to tweak your mind in the right direction. So love it, Olivia. Thanks for coming on. Talar, thanks for joining me again as co-host, my new regular. She doesn't know it yet, but she's going to be my new regular. And thank you all for listening. I appreciate the love. Until next time on The Defense Never Rests, we will see you then.